Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our guest for today is Jodi Davidson. She is founder for the organization called Leader Within. So, Leader Within is a leadership and personal development platform which is focused on helping individuals build confident, authentic leadership, emotional connections, and a strong sense of belonging. So she has an extensive experience, actually decades of experience working in executive leaderships and building psychologically safe cultures. So I'm sure our conversation today is going to be very useful to our listeners. And I would start with my own personal journey. The reason why I'm looking forward to getting insights from Jody is that I myself stumbled into a leadership role by accident. I was not prepared for the leadership role. I was on a technical growth trajectory, but an unfortunate incident happened in my organization. Our company CEO passed away due to an unfortunate accident, and company's founder promoted me to the leadership role. And this is where I realized that I was very ill equipped with dealing with people and running people centric organization, but I started learning. I did not give up. I started learning all those skill sets that were needed for that job to perform successfully. So I learned emotional intelligence. I learned self awareness. I came to know about my strengths and weaknesses. And this is where I realized that 10 years later, I am at a point where I am an entirely different person. And I believe that all of us have right and all of us should have ability to learn these skill sets without running into a tragic accident or situation like the one I had to go through. So the reason I'm connecting with Jodi is that she runs this organization called Leader Within, and it connects with my story. And she works on bringing the best versions of leadership within yourself. So, Jodi, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I think it is an honor to have you with us.
Well, I feel that it's an honor to be here for this important conversation. And whatever I can do to support you and your listeners in really tapping into the leader within ourselves, and then to recognize that in others, it's my life's passion and what I consider my legacy.
Thank you so much. And I think it's a great starting point if we talk about what made you transition into a founder. I think you have very impressive experience working with some of the biggest companies in culture development and executive roles, and then transitioning into a founder for this company. So what was the motivation? What caused you to go this route?
Well, I could just jump right in, but before doing so, I want to acknowledge that my life story was shaped because of my brother who has autism. And growing up in a situation as an older sibling to somebody whose potential was somewhat locked in, because he's to this day he's nonverbal, that people didn't see in Ronald what I saw in him because I knew his heart.
Right.
And I realized that if I could have that type of experience with my brother who was somewhat locked into his mind and his body, why not create that environment for others? So my entire career has been about helping to unleash potential and unlock that in people that maybe don't see that initially in
Right.
themselves. Like your story is so compelling. I worked for, to your point, an organization for many, many years, a little bit comfortable, certainly felt like home.
Right.
And in my founder story, which is on my website, which is under construction, because I'm still a baby in this, the message in the founder story, that I'm sure we'll talk about all of it, is a pink slip set me free. And and respected people that were entrepreneurs out there doing the stuff that I had a captured audience of
Right.
thousands of people that I
Right.
was able to reach through the various programs, mentoring, learning experiences, communities that I was able to be a part of and to help form. So I was so comfortable in that environment that I spent at for so many years,
Right.
wouldn't have freed myself up had it not been for a riff. that was
Right.
almost exactly a year to almost a year to a day ago when I
Right.
was informed. And literally, it was a message that came from the universe or whatever your sense of faith-based perspective is. I heard a message as I was being informed about being laid off, and it was swooping in. And the message was, "You are now free." And
Right.
within 24 hours, I knew that what that meant was that the work that I was primed to do in a greater sense, beyond the walls of one, be it a large organization that I was so fortunate to work with for so many years,
Right.
that it was now time to set myself free. And I knew within about 24 hours that that meant that I would be launching a leadership coaching and
Mm.
consulting practice.
Right.
And within about a week, I knew that Leader Within needed
Right.
to be the name of it
Yes.
because it was about helping people realize inside of themselves what external conditions can't do for any of us. We
Mm.
have to do the
Right.
work within
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
So, yeah, let me pause there, and I know you have a bunch of
Yeah.
questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, again, I'm very big fan of this self awareness topic, and I think it is one of the underrated topic out there, especially for leaders. So for someone who is just transitioning into leadership role or they want to go into leadership role, what are the advices from yourself, especially around self awareness? How can they go about identifying their own self better? And are there any techniques or are there any processes or methodologies that you adopt as part of your coaching that you can share with our audience? I think those will be great.
I'm really happy to, and I'm gaining so much. I'm wanting to stay humble in that I am getting clear inside myself and how to articulate this. So if I stumble a little bit, then we're learning and we're growing together,
Right.
okay? If that's fair. So one thing that I think is important to know is that technical skills are table stakes. And the technical skills are not necessarily the things that are going to get us from here to there, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that I think is really important is, and this is my own philosophy, and different cultural norms and different organizations have different perspectives on this. I don't believe that hierarchy is the most important thing when it comes to being a leader. I
Right.
believe that, and this is where, if we think about leader within in a broad sense, because somebody might tune out and say, well, I'm not a people manager, so
Right.
I'm not a leader, or I don't have a particular title, so I'm not a leader. And I want to invite all of us to think of ourselves as leaders and people who have agency.
Right.
And what I would say is that the distinction between a leader who is effective and one that would not be so effective is the ability to have followers, that
Right.
people trust you to have their best interest in mind. And
Right.
all of those things that you were talking about with emotional intelligence and self awareness and those kinds of things. So in Leader Within, I call them 5 competencies. And
Mhm.
one might ask, well, are these really competencies? And you have a perfect example to say, yes, these leadership traits are not innate. Some
Mhm.
people it might come a little bit naturally for, but at the end of the day, the beauty in what's coming to mind as having a growth mindset is that we
Right.
all have the ability to learn these things, much like
Right.
you did. And
Right.
you were like thrown in. And I want people to have an easier
Right.
way of, through your lessons learned
Right.
and through my lessons
Right.
learned, what is it? So these competencies, it starts with identity freedom,
Mhm.
where we can be authentic and comfortable in our skin.
Right.
Because if we're not comfortable in our own skin, we can't make other people comfortable. It has to start
Mhm.
inside of ourselves.
Right.
And I would say that there are 3 prerequisite competencies. One is about mental fitness. And are
Mm.
we being resilient? And are we able to be more responsive versus reactive because
Right.
we're grounded in
Mm.
how we bounce back, how we're resilient when things get hard. So
Right.
that's mental fitness. Emotional agility is another. And you talked again, you mentioned the emotional intelligence. I want to say emotional agility is having a wide range of experiences of emotions, that we're not bypassing the harder emotions. We're acknowledging all of them. And when we have that ability to be self aware, regulate, leaders have to regulate their emotions,
Yes.
but that we bring a level of self compassion. And when we're able to have that empathy and compassion inside of ourselves, we're able to demonstrate that for other people. And that, I believe, is where a lot of the psychological safety can come from,
Mm.
which is
Right.
really about being courageous to ask questions and not feel like if we're vulnerable, that is going to lead to some sort of retribution or retaliation. It's a sign of strength, not weakness. The third prerequisite is on what I like to call energetic vitality. And this is where we have boundaries. Have struggled, and being transparent here, with
Mm.
workaholic tendencies, that my identity was all about perfectionism. So, whole definition of who we are being aligned with our jobs and not practicing self-care.
Right.
When we drink from an empty cup, there's nothing there for us to hold on to for ourselves, and there is a contagion around the way we show up and the energy that we bring to our interactions.
Right.
And the fifth area is relational intelligence.
Mm.
And this is where we can build trust with people, that we are collaborating effectively.
Mm.
And without the relational intelligence, we're not going to have those followers. So it comes full circle back to what is the skill set that a leader needs. Would you agree on that in your environment, being the leader that you are, you must have people follow you or else you're going to be ineffective?
Right. You're right. 100% right. And I think I loved few things. The one that all of us are a leader. Leadership is not a tag, as they say that there are people who are leaders and that there are people who lead. So if even if you don't have a title, you can still lead with example. You can make a difference for in the life of people who are around you. And I think that is only possible if you are self-aware and you know emotional intelligence. So if you are emotionally intelligent, and not only you are making your own life better, but you are also making the life of person on your right, person on your left better as well. So even if somebody who is listening and they don't hold the title of an executive or director or vice president right now, whatever title they have or whatever job they have, they can still lead. They don't have to hold a title to start leading. So I think I really loved that. Another area which you pointed out, and this really connected with me with having self compassion. I think this happens with many new leaders that when they come into leadership role, they start looking at themselves or start feeling that they are not doing good enough job, and they start punishing themselves emotionally, mentally for not delivering results soon enough or not meeting the bar of the previous leader. So I think being compassion to your own self is a strength. If you are able to give yourself kindness, give yourself little bit of empathy, I think you can not only transform your own personality, but in this way you will be able to understand the performance or understand the behaviors of others as well in much better way. So I think these are two or three big takeaway from what you explained so far about your methodology on self-awareness.
I'm thinking about a couple of things in relation to what you were just talking about. Years ago, I had the opportunity and the privilege to chair a diversity council. And the premise was, how do people at the grassroots level be empowered to make cultural changes? And the diversity being that it was people from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, all different levels coming together to be the change that they wanted to see. And
Right.
there was a retail manager that I spent a good bit of time with over the years. Kelvin is his name. I need to get back in touch with Kelvin. It's been a long while. But Kelvin was a retail manager, and he was the most influential out of the entire council, and it was incredible what he was able to accomplish. And I one time said to Kelvin, "How do you do it?" He said, "Make," so he had like the vice president was the senior most level of this regional area. "I make the vice president think that it's his idea when it's really
Wow.
mine, but I empower the leader, like the leader with the title, to
Right.
think that they own that piece." And he wasn't so egotistical about a sense of ownership of his idea.
Mm.
And I love that, is spreading the wealth in that way, and this retail manager was a role model of that. Other thing that you talked about being that you connected, I think, speaking of energy, you connected energetically to the idea of self-compassion.
Yeah.
And I love Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion. She's really like the thought leader in the space that talks about 3 elements, which are, do you treat yourself the way you would a friend, about the kindness, and I say forgiveness too when we make a mistake about something. She talks about common humanity, which
Mm.
is that we are not alone, and there's such a loneliness pandemic or epidemic that's happening that people are feeling isolated. And when we feel less alone, so if you're a new leader just coming in, how do you rally around you other people that can be your mentors, that you can feel that you can confide in, that can be your entrusted um, personal board of advisors, so to speak.
Right.
And then the third area is mindfulness. And this is where we become objective and grounded and live in this moment rather than having the regrets that happen from the past or the anxiety that lives in the future. If we can be right here in the here and now, then that's the definition of self compassion.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing these powerful insights. And I just want to linger on a little bit because I faced this challenge as well, and I'm sure a lot of people do that. Is negative self-talk, and I think sometimes I am big advocate for law of attraction as well, especially manifestation, visualization, and all those things. And one big topic that I do my best to talk about and guide people on is how to avoid negative self-talk. I think again, if it's related with self-compassion, that negative self-talk is, I think, not
Yeah.
useful at all. It demotivates you, and even if you are signaling universe for not so great outcomes. So I think it happens with many leaders, especially the new ones, and also with technical folks as well, that we sometimes have negative self-talk about our own self. So what approach or what is your philosophy to avoid negative self-talk, and how can we effectively reframe those thoughts or feeling towards positive talk?
Yeah. I think that this is where, if you're struggling with negative self talk, to this is where engaging a coach that can help you to interrupt those thought habits,
Mhm.
because we really are, our reality is based on what we think and the way we feel about things, and that generates actions. So it becomes a ripple effect of how we behave in the world. And
Mhm.
if we're telling ourselves that we are a certain way, then that's true. And if we tell ourselves the opposite, the same thing with gratitude, if we lean into acknowledging the goodness that we can see, even in spite of things being difficult, then the goodness is going to be right there in front of us, where the same thing could happen where the negative experience, that if that's our laser focus, then that's going to be how we then create our reality. And even if it's I saying something about the negative self-talk, or what could appear to be
Uh,
positive talk, because I am not this. The energy of what you're speaking about is then amplified. So it's
Right.
really important for us to speak in the affirmative to your point of what is it that we want to experience. How do we see ourselves in the world, not from the I am not, but
Mm.
from the I am? And
Right.
how do we live into that? So, for example, in this moment, I want to ask you if I were to say, on what is your I am statement? What naturally comes to mind for you? I'm curious.
Yeah. So my I am statement is that I am optimistic person and I love learning from challenges.
Mm, good. And when you're optimistic and you love learning from challenges, how does that impact your ability to lead your team?
I can lead by example in this way. Then when I'm learning from challenges and I'm not running away from challenges, I send this message and vibe that if I can do it, they can also do it. And if I can experiment with trying to attempt different approaches, they can also experiment. And this connects with my approach of creating a psychologically safe environment for team as well, because of course, not every experiment ends up resulting in good outcomes. Sometimes you are not able to achieve good outcomes, sometimes you are. So I want to send this message out that if I am experimenting, I am failing, they can do the same and they can learn from failed experiments and then try again.
Yeah, I guess that whole notion from years ago from the Silicon Valley that was speaking about failing fast. And
Yeah.
there might be some contradictory perspectives about that, but I love that concept
Yeah.
because, and I have mentors that need to remind me about this being in the startup
Right.
of that every experiment will not generate the same outcomes. And if we can feel that we're in a playful space, and
Yeah.
that we don't take things that are not catastrophic so seriously,
Right. Right.
then we're able to then continue to expand on the things that work and
Right.
let go in a forgiving, gentle way the
Right.
times when things didn't work so well. And all of it is part of the wisdom that we gain in the process, right?
So true. Tell us about your take on the power of storytelling. I was going through your website and some of the work you have done. I got this sense that you believe in the power of storytelling for
Yeah.
meaningful and positive outcomes. How can a normal person, someone who goes to work, come back and they have a standard life, maybe life outside of a leadership role, how can they adopt the power of storytelling
Mm.
for their growth?
Yeah. I think transparency in sharing who we are and that we're an integrated one human being rather than it being about the worker bee human doing. And when we have that level of sharing, and there are times that, and maybe I overshare at times. So I'm just saying, open book. And
Uh,
yet, the power of telling our story, like the fact that I opened by sharing about my brother, or I recently did a workshop for a group that's focused on well-being around it's called caregiving on the clock. And my mom has dementia. And so I was very transparent about sharing about my own challenges being in that sandwich generation of
uh,
caring for my kids are grown, but they're still, like under my watch, so to speak. And
yeah.
I guess they always will be. Helicopter mom, hello. And then with my mom, and that story about being a caregiver for my mom was something that opened up the possibility that other people could be vulnerable and share their stories. Or that's the identity freedom that we're able to articulate who we are and how we be in the world. And then other people in turn are given permission to know that with us, they are in fact safe to share their story and their lived experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And in my founder story that I invite people to have a look at, I'm extremely vulnerable about some things that I'm not proud of. And from that, my lived story turned into something called Kintsugi Connected Leader that in a matter of weeks should be registered by the Patent and Trademark Office. So we're
Awesome.
waiting on that. I just got word this week about the application being accepted. The
Oh, great.
kintsugi connected leader, kintsugi is I think yes, I have a piece right here as a demonstration. This is kintsugi, which is a Japanese art form of taking broken pottery and putting it back together with gold. And I decided that we too, as human beings, cracked wide open and
Right.
then we meld ourselves, we repair with gold. That's the
Oh,
gold and the goodness in coming back together in a new and different way. Like you said, you're not the same as you were 10 years ago and getting to the other side of that. So and I'll tell you about the storytelling and tying it all together. Release what doesn't serve while honoring our strengths, repair the fractures with gold, and then the renewal is transformation because we've gotten to the other side of that hard work with habits and practices that are sticky rather than it just being, okay, I attended a workshop and I liked it. But
mm,
does behavior really change? And the invitation is to work on moving yourself to a place where it becomes routine and almost
oh,
that good way of being, and,
right.
good is a loaded word, but the leadership way, where you invite followership and you make it safe because you're meeting other people where they are, that's where the goodness, the kintsugi happens in our lives. And so that is not possible if we're not able to tell our story, all of it, because we're honoring our fractures and we're not saying we're broken. We're saying that we're coming back together and the whole story, this is a chapter, this is a season. This is something that allows us to be our best and brightest, where we're shining in a way that's helpful and in service to ourselves and to others. I guess you can tell that storytelling is important, and I'll share one more thing about storytelling. I volunteer for an organization called Someone to Tell It To.
No.
And when people feel that without any sort of agenda,
Mm,
we are able to, I've been trained in this, hold space to hear what their joys are, perhaps, but more often it's what is the trauma that might be getting in the way. And when somebody is able to release that, they feel better. There's a sense of well being that allows them to thrive and create potential and contribution that wouldn't otherwise be possible. So, how do we be those someones to tell it to, the someone to tell it to? How do we do that in our organizations
right.
without overreaching or being intrusive? But the
Correct.
invitation, making that available is a
Mm,
good sign of leadership, I do believe.
absolutely. And I think one thing that's worth addressing is that I believe everyone has a great story to tell. Everyone has their own story, but the art of storytelling is not taught uh, taught enough in at workplaces, in our schools, in our educational institutes. So, if we are able to teach people the art of storytelling, connect their story with a methodology, I think we can transform the workplaces, we can transform the individuals because once their stories are out there, it's not only going to inspire themselves, but it is also going to inspire their listeners as well. So I think let's play our part in teaching people the art of storytelling as well. That you have a great story, how you can tell it in a way that will resonate with people, and I think this is where people like yourself are making a great impact. I believe so.
Yeah, and I think about the Native American practice of a talking stick, where you're holding the stick and people are being present as you're telling your story. So the art of listening, which is one of the biggest and most
Right.
important competencies of coaching, the art of listening is every bit as important as the art of storytelling. And when we listen to somebody else's story, and because there's congruence that happens, that the synapses that are firing in your brain are getting closer to the synapses that are firing in my brain, and it comes together. And that's where common ground and a mutual understanding and respect can come from in a time that, do we dare say that it's a polarizing time? And so,
Right.
how do we do our part to mitigate for that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think I just looked at the clock and we have consumed more than half an hour. So thank you. I think it was a great conversation and I have a long list of things to go through. Maybe we can do the episode 2 for our conversation. But before I let you go, I have one final question, that if someone wants to reach out to you for their coaching, for mentorship, please let us know what are the medium, what are the ways through which they can reach out to you for help.
Um, the easiest thing is to go onto my website, which admittedly is under construction, but you get enough of the sense of my offer, right? And you can find me and book an appointment so that we can just have a, I like to say, a virtual coffee. www.leaderwithin.net is the easiest way.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, sharing your wisdom. I'm sure it's going to be helpful to many of our listeners, and I truly enjoyed our conversation.
I enjoyed too. Thank you so much.